What is art?
Art is
history.
What is art? That's a good question.
This is Art Uncovered.
Art is our collective cultural history.
A weekly podcast that brings you interviews with an eclectic mix of artists and creators.
Art is
disappointing your parents.
I'm your host, Kimberly.
And my dad is the same way. He's very nostalgic for the past. He lives in the past. He says he's extremely nostalgic for like birthday parties, family time, when things were good for white people, especially, like during like the 50s and 60s.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. That was the voice of my guest this week, Amy Ritter, a New York-based artist who recently received a NYFA grant to continue her investigation into forgotten and marginalized mobile home communities across the United States. In this episode, we talk about Amy's experience of growing up in a mobile home, her close relationship with her conservative father, and her desire to listen to the struggles of low-income Americans and to understand their political motivations. Stay with us. Welcome back, listeners. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's episode of Art Uncovered. This week, I am so honored to be here with Amy Ritter. Amy, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
So today I'd like to focus a majority of our conversation on a body of work of yours that's titled Mobile Home Archive. Sometimes you use MH Archive, so listeners, they mean basically the same thing. But this body of work, it's an investigation into, and I'll quote you here, forgotten and marginalized mobile homes across the United States. So to start, I'm wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about where your inspiration for this investigation came from, and then we could talk about how you went about procuring your research and information and images and all the things that make up this amazing body of work.
Yeah, sure. I feel like there's so much in there to, the MH archive or mobile home or manufactured home kind of stems from my childhood. I grew up in a mobile home park, and it took me a really long time to come to the realization that a lot of my work and my interests were coming from my childhood and the materials and the place that I lived and the people I lived around. So when I discovered that was like back in 2015, like right after grad school, I went to Vermont Studio Center for a residency and came across my first mobile home community where I started photographing them. And I also found an abandoned mobile home, which I did installations in. I just kind of exploded and was like, oh, this is what it's all about is, I'm really interested in these people. And so because of all like other circumstances of like trying to find money for grants and things, I was like, well, you know what, I'm just gonna start doing these things on my own. And I started to become like, instituting is like sort of the new like verb of like artists who become an archivist. Like I'm not an archivist or a sociologist or a cartographer making maps, but I do all these things in my practice. So it's a way for me to sort of infiltrate and become someone that, can be more trusted. So like the shirt that I'm wearing now, which is like a blue button-up worker shirt.
Yeah.
I actually created a logo with the help of a friend that says MH Archive based on sort of the logos and fonts of mobile home companies. And so in the beginning stages of the archive, before I coined it that term, because that's like a term a lot of people can relate to and understand. I used to just go in rogue to mobile home parks by myself, like photographing them. I would photograph them. If I talked to people, I would interview them, not interview, but just, have conversations. And then as I got more into it, I started to actually like have a nicer camera, asked to photograph them. I just wanted to collect as much information as possible because I have a terrible memory. And back in like, right, I forget what year I went to the Atlantic Center for the Arts. It's just like 4 or 5 years ago. I actually had the logo. I put the logo on my truck and I started, because these are all private spaces, mobile home communities. Like when you enter them, they're owned by someone who owns all the land, and then the homes are set on them. And they, each owner of the home owns their house, and then they pay a lot rent each month to sustain, sewage and water and electricity and all of that.
Okay.
So these spaces aren't actually public spaces. So there's been times where I got chased out of mobile home communities or being called a drug dealer or like they don't know, because they're they're very weary of outsiders because of the stigmas and stereotypes. And, they're also like worried that they're going to get written up for having a violation on their property. So having the archive logo and things like that, like allowed me to be, show them like that it's a safe space for me to be there, like that I actually have an archive, which technically I don't have a public archive of these communities, but it is just a way for me to sort of institute myself into that space. And as you get older, you get more fearful of doing these projects. And there's a million different types of communities that you can go into, all age communities, 55 plus communities, and like different class, like there can be $1 million homes and there can be $1,000 homes that you would buy. So it's a high diversity. And like through that project of traveling across the United States, I did a cross country trip. It was just, it was one to like gain more information to then use for grant proposals. And then another whole aspect of it is like, I don't actually know what I do with my archive. I mean, I create these series within my public sculptures and within other projects within my practice. But like, it's actually more of like, I just need to like physically feel the spaces, physically feel the people. It's a curiosity of like, who are these people? Why are they unhappy? Are they doing okay? How's their health care? How's their family? Why are they living here? How did they get here? What's their American dream? Like, I'm just really curious about that, so that I can take that feeling and embody that like through the work.
That's great. Yeah, I have a couple of follow-up questions. One, are people more willing to, or have people been more willing to let you into their home with like the uniform and the logo?
Yes and no. I mean, it's kind of surprising. Like if I go into a community and usually there's that one watch person. It's like kind of scary. I'm a very social person. But usually my best tactic is to just go right up to that person and talk to them and be like, hi, I'm Amy Ritter. Like, I am archiving mobile home communities because no one is doing this. And like, I try to talk to them in a way that just shows them like, I grew up in a mobile home and, in Pennsylvania. And like, I'm really curious about you and the people who live here. And I want to put you in this archive, like make it feel special.
Yeah,
because I feel like a lot of people feel unacknowledged and not important, and everyone's just as important as the next person. So I think after talking to a lot of people, they have this renewed sense of like, oh, someone cares about us. Like, oh, I am special. Like this, like now I'll let you come in my house and have a cup of water, or like, take my photograph. And I think the logo does legitimize it and allows, I mean, now my practice is to give a phone call to the park office first. And then it's like I get the permission to either meet with the manager, the park owner, and then I have a little more sense of reassurance of like, I can walk around. Or like in Florida, I'd get golf cart rides around and I could videotape. And like a lot of the owners will take me around in their cars. So like it feels a little bit more, like, because, I'm walking around with like a camera, and I'm like taking photos of like people's homes and their window spaces and them. So it's definitely like a fine line of like, how far do I take it? Like, I'm not trying to be like a photojournalistic artist and document it in that way. It's almost like the documentation is just a way for me to have a memory that I can use to create other things.
Do you have any memorable encounters with people, either being good encounters or scary encounters?
I mean, I've definitely, when I did this trip where I did travel across the US, my partner was with me and our little dog was with us too. And we were like camping out of the truck. And, there's a few places down south that were more difficult to be in. And I mean, there's obviously like places where they're flying rebel flags and, things that like, maybe I'm not going to get out of my car here and I have to make that decision. But there's, I've talked to some people who like, there was a woman in Tennessee and, she just came out and asked me what I was doing. And that's like my favorite thing, like if someone comes down and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, great. Like I'm like searching for someone because I'm not knocking on people's doors. And My partner always says I have like the special talent of like everywhere we go, no matter what we're doing, someone will like tell me their entire life story, like without asking. Like maybe I have this sort of non-judgmental
Mm.
personality and confidentiality. I'm not sure, but like the grocery store clerk will tell me their whole life within like the 3 minute encounter. So I feel like this woman, single mother, and she was telling about her health issues and about her kids leaving. And then literally she said the night before her son's girlfriend like shot herself in the front lawn and
Oh
killed
my gosh.
herself.
Oh my gosh.
Like things like that, where then we're all like in tears crying. And I'm like, I can't believe this woman just told me
Wow. Oh, I
this.
got
I
goosebumps.
know. And
Wow.
it's like
Wow.
so intense. And like she's crying and I'm crying. And like, because no one has anyone to talk to about these things. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they hold it
Mm-hmm.
in, they can't afford a therapist. They're not searching for self-care. And it's like, I come along and I have an ear to listen and they
Mm-hmm.
literally tell
Mm-hmm.
me everything. So it's like it feels really special to like have someone open up to me like that. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's definitely
that's
like a
beautiful.
very memorable one. And I think about her all the time when I'm doing this work.
I'm
So
sure. I'm sure. What do you think, do you propose like an end goal for them? Like you want to help them, or do you propose it as like I just want to listen to you? Like what do you
yeah, it's more
they
of
hope
like
to
a
get out of
list.
it?
Yeah, it's more of like a listening. Like I'm not giving them any ultimatums or saying like I need this from you or whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
I do what I'm very just intuitive and I go into it with no expectations and I let whatever happens happens. And sometimes I take people's photographs and then I ask for their email and I'm like, I'd love to take your photograph. I'll send you the photos. And so I'll try to stay in contact with people, but it's very difficult and people don't like to participate. So but when I get into a community and one neighbor comes out, then the next neighbor comes out, then they take me to the next person. It just becomes
Oh,
like
that's
this really
beautiful.
cute thing, but like I don't
Yeah.
get to stick around long enough to like really. I mean, I've done things in the past, like gone to like mobile home park happy hours for like retirement communities where I'd go
Oh
every
my gosh,
week.
that's so
But
cute.
like, and I would take their photograph as like an exchange, like here's your photograph of your whole group, and like that's my present to you.
I see. I
But
see.
I can't really get too involved because I think I would
Yeah.
it's also like extremely physical and mentally draining to do this type of work because you're like it's like going on a first date. You're like going
Uh-huh.
into these places where you have no idea who you're going to meet, what you're going to talk about. And so like, I can't always like do this type of work. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have to be
Mm-hmm.
selective and like be in the mental state of like, okay, I'm doing this for the next week and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
this state and I'm meeting these people. And Facebook is actually kind of the best place to find people actually.
Yeah. I'm curious, what do you think your parents would say if someone like a young person came up to their door when you were young, wanting to talk to them? How do you think they would?
I mean, my dad would talk their ear off. He
That's
thinks
great.
like he is like a very social person.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents just divorced this past year. And so my
Sorry to
dad's
hear
living
that.
alone in his mobile home that I grew up in. And he's
Mm,
actually a huge, like, he's my muse right now in my artwork. And it's sort of shifted to me talking about everyone else to now like looking inside to be like, what is going on with my father? What is his
wow.
situation? There's like a lot of gross stuff going on with like investment firms buying up mobile home parks and charging them astronomical amounts of rent because there's no caps on that stuff or regulations. Like I said, I consider them marginalized because they're, considered insignificant and on the periphery and often built next to highways or in marshes or in undesirable places and like shielded with fences and bushes and privatized like that
Mm-hmm.
way. So like a lot of people, they're not thinking about making laws for them or like,
Mm-hmm.
they're only showing them on the news when their house gets washed away in a hurricane. Like
Right,
that's kind
right.
of like the main example I would give of like when you're seeing people in mobile homes on the
Mm-hmm.
news.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to, if you're okay with it, I found a video on your was that like Vimeo page where it was kind of a compilation of different interviews from with different people. Now I'm gonna do a screen share. Let me see if I can.
Oh, is it the audio piece?
It is. It
Okay, yeah.
is. So in this piece, is it? people that you met on your travels, or is it family?
This piece was specifically, this is like the most recent. So this is a question I asked the American, like, what are people's American dreams? Which is a
Okay.
very antiquated phrase. Like, how do we even connect with that phrase anymore? But I did a show in Philly and I wanted to collect 7 interviews from my parents' community, Little Wolf Mobile Home Park. And so this is 7 people from their community, including my mom and dad's American dreams.
My American dream would pretty much be to have what my parents had, to have an affordable house, to be able to retire with a pension from a great company, and that just does not exist anymore. But I think what we had and lost is what I would definitely like to have. Dad worked at Mack Trucks all those years, retired from there, had a great pension, that and his Social Security before he passed away. I mean, it kept him living nice, you know, he didn't have to worry. My parents bought their house in 1966 for $16,000. That same home sells today for $350,000.
My American dream is to live like my forefathers did and have everything paid for, and work to own what I do have, to be able to walk the streets safely and not have to worry about money or any situation, to know that I can get up every day and go to work, and that what I'm working for is a better life for myself.
And I'm going to pause it there. That is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, they're like really sad, a lot of them.
So
I mean, these are
sad.
people that are
And so
older too.
profound. And like, yeah, just their voices are like, gosh.
And it's hard because it's like these are probably like 2-hour conversations. And then I'm like, okay, let's get because I'm trying to like make them feel comfortable and not act and like,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of them, like the common thing between all of them. And what I tell them too is like, if you can share this, it's going to show other people that they're not alone and that they also are feeling similar thoughts.
Beautiful.
And so that's why I like try to convince, because it's hard to convince people for me to call them and do this and spend the time to talk about something that they don't really need to talk about. But common things between them are all like, I want to go back to a time when things were better. Like, they're like, well, you know, back then I could be a janitor. And then my father worked his way up to being an engineer, and they didn't need a college degree. But now you can't do that. They're all sourced out and in separate, you know, companies. And so like, I just noticed this sort of trend amongst everyone. And my dad is the same way. He's very nostalgic for the past. He lives in the past. He says he's extremely nostalgic for like birthday parties, family time, like when things were good for white people, especially, you know, like during like the 50s and 60s. And like, you know, I think a lot about that when it comes to like people who support Trump, and, you know, that slogan of Make America Great Again is kind of like the most ingenious marketing plan, because it's provoking these feelings of the past. And now it's like these people are feeling like they told us we were going to have all these things, and now we don't have them, and we feel left behind, and we don't have good. I have the same job as my father, but I can't even afford my lot rent, and I can't go on vacation. I can't give my kids what I want to give them. What, you know, my family was able to give them this, was able to give me all these things, and now I can't on the same job. So it's like, you know, these are the voices that I feel like we need to start listening to, because it's like such a gray area, and that gray area has so much information. And even though these people are, you know, you can see them as, you know, mundane or average or whatever, they're all super interesting. They're all super important to the story. So my goal is to collect more of these, and try to source more stories from people.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm curious because right now I just played it online, but how do you, bringing this, I guess, to like the art object. So how does your collection of material, of interviews, of photographs, like how do they manifest in terms of the physical art space?
So far with the audio, what I've been doing is I've showed this audio now. This will be the second time I have a show going up in Philly right now at the Stella Elkins Tyler Gallery, and then it was shown at Grizzly Gallery in Philly, which I like because it's like Pennsylvania and this is Pennsylvania Connection. And how I had it was like an old cassette tape player, like the ones that you could like record on. It has like a handle.
Yeah, sure.
And I had someone put it on a cassette tape because these are all people like this generation that I seem to keep gravitating towards, which is this like 60 plus community and, you know, like baby boomer generation.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I feel like that's such a relatable device. And what you can do then is in the spaces you have headphones and you can actually take it off the wall and walk around with it, listening to these stories and then see the visuals, like the window series that I make, which are photographic cutouts on OSB plywood. And you can like look at these things and see people in these window spaces and look at the homes that I have photographs of and like be in their minds, in their heads, and like what these people are thinking and why they're in these situations. I think at this recent show, they're going to, I think for the closing ceremony, they're going to play it out loud. Which
so
so
it won't involve headphones and that kind of.
Yeah. But it is personal to have the headphones and just be listening to these stories in your ear. And ideally, like I'm making this audio for I've been trying to work on a larger installation, which would be having a mobile home, single wide mobile home that I could transport around the country. And I would have these audios playing inside of the home and it would be an immersive experience. Amazing. So that's kind of also why I began recording the audios, because you always have to make all the work ahead before you can get the funding to make the thing that you want to make. So I'm always just like, fuck it, I'm just going to go do it. I'm going to travel across the US. I'm going to record these dreams. I'm going to, you know, continue the progress.
Yeah, I have on the screen here pictures of windows. What's going on? Are these windows of or from a mobile home?
Yeah, this one is the most recent one I made. And so they're called the MH Window series. And this one is of my father inside of his house. And this is the first time I've ever photographed a person inside of the window. Usually they're not there because I'm not trying to, unless I can see someone and ask them to do something. I don't. I usually just like it to be what it is. But my dad did post for this. So what you're looking at, if you're looking at the YouTube channel or not, but is a large window. They're 1-to-1 scale. It's a large blueprint colored Xerox print that's adhered to the OSB plywood. So you have this papery texture that's wrinkled and also like textured with the plywood, which is relating to mobile home flooring. And it's screwed directly under the wall and coated with like a poly on top of it. And this image was my dad on the couch through his living room window, sort of resting pensively. And then you can see what I love playing with is the reflection in the window shows the space behind me, which is your clue of like, oh, this is maybe a housing community. Where is this? And then you have little like tidbits, like he has like a sticker on his window with a picture of a gun that says like something like "Do not enter. It's not worth losing your life" or something, like a NRA sticker or something. And then you see sort of the space behind my dad, another window into his life, and so it becomes like a whole story within this one space. And it also becomes like a very voyeur, like you're walking through a gallery space and you become the voyeur. You're allowed to look inside of someone's window and not feel like you can't, or that you're invading someone's privacy. So I'm giving like permission to do that.
I'm gonna stop the screen share for a second, because that was the second time that you mentioned your father. So you're currently making work about him.
I mean, I've made now
How
like
is that going?
a few video pieces. Like my work keeps transforming. Now I'm really interested. I like really making things about the thing, like being very literal. And so I came to photography later in life, added it to the sculpture, and now I'm really interested in video. And like one of the most recent video works I made was on a CRT TV. I display a I use my dad's old camcorder from like the 90s that takes little small discs.
Cool.
And so whenever I
Yeah.
go to his house, I'm recording his birthday parties. I'm recording the things that he says to me in the car, videotaping him. And he likes to be performing, and he pretends like he doesn't say anything, and he knows that I'm like doing it. And I mean, he participated in that piece with the window, and he's participated in some of my other works, and he supports me. He comes to my openings.
That's so
And
sweet.
yeah, so the video piece is like 9 minutes. It's called Welcome to Little Wolf, and I take you through the community. We roll up to my dad's house. You see the Trump sign in the front yard. It's during the 2016 election. We go inside his home. You're getting to see into some of his personal hoarding collections and the Trump hats and like Bibles, stacks of Bibles. And then you see him as a character. And I wanted to get across like this loneliness and pensiveness, and like, you know, loneliness is one of the biggest pandemics in this country right now. And, you know, that's what I fear for him. But then it goes in the climax of the video is a birthday party, because that's his favorite thing of the year is his birthday. And he has to have a specific cheat cake that he had when he was a kid. And like, I love the metaphor of like the ways that people survive throughout the year, or like through these holidays and through these moments. And you get to make these wishes, and, you know, or Thanksgiving, you get to say what you're thankful for and break a wishbone. Like, I love, or like even like how people play the lottery. Like, what are things that people instill hope in to keep themselves going? And the birthday party is one for my dad. And then it, you know, so it's like about a 9-minute video, and it takes you on this sort of experience of getting to know who my father is. And I also have another video that's a large projection of a mobile home cutout with birthday candles in it. And my dad sat there, and while I recorded this in his backyard, it was small, and there's like a highway in the background, my father's mobile home. He's sitting behind me burning stuff, which is illegal in a mobile home park too. But these birthday candles look really beautiful. There's you know, the cinematography of it is really great with the lighting in a space. And as the candles melt, the home begins to burn, and then the house burns down, which is like, you go from this happy, joyous moment to this sad, destructive moment, which is, you know, I'm playing on these fears of my father and many other people in these communities, where if one home burns down, it melts and burns down the homes next to them in succession. So it's like always a huge fear that that will happen to him. So it's interesting to do this in front of him.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
But, you know, my whole family is like inept of emotions. Like, I try to ask him, like, how does it feel that I just burnt down this image of your home in your backyard while you have a fire going? And he doesn't know how to express himself. Later on, I've interviewed him many times or talked to him on the phone. He eventually was like, I think you do it because of your love for me, which just like made me melt. Like, I've never heard him say that before. So I'm still trying to figure out why I'm making work about him, and why I'm so interested in him as a character. He has like such a, you know, hyper religious. He's into, you know, Trump politics, like apocalyptic stuff. Like, he also is kind of coming out as queer, but we can't quite put our finger on it because he won't talk about it because he thinks it's demons. So it's also a very sad story in that way, where like this generation really couldn't express themselves, and there's some resentment there maybe for how people are now. So I'm trying to like explore him and use the lens through him to like show a broader context of like what the broader Americans might be going through in a similar age and class as him.
You said that he goes to your art shows. What is his reaction or perception of your work?
One of the most recent ones that he went to was a show I had in Dumbo at AIR Gallery through a fellowship. And that show is like literally all about him. Like, there was the window piece, the two videos, there was a burnt down home photograph. It's a small space, so you couldn't fit a lot in there, but he came not at the opening, but later on. I mean, it's hard to even get him to go into New York City. I had to have someone drive him because he just has a lot of ideas about what the city is like, if you can imagine. And he posed by all the artworks. I took photographs of him. He was, you know, teasing it up. And, later on, like maybe a few days later, I gave him time. I was like, I don't even think he read my artist statement, even though I asked him to. But I was like, how'd you like my show? Like, what did you think? And he was like, oh, lunch was really great. Lunch was great at Junior's. I love that place. Like, I'm like, no, the art. He's like, I don't know. I have to think about it. He just doesn't even want to go there. And I found it, I wasn't sure how the work would be perceived. And I had so many people come up to me after that exhibition or during it. And I had so many lovely conversations, which aren't always expected at openings, of people who were relating to my father's character, even though they know the politics are very different, even though they know like he's white and they're maybe black. I still relate to your father and I see my family in him. And
Wow.
I just found that really powerful that like his character can be relatable. And like, you don't get to choose your parents. My parents would not be my friends in normal life, And even now I don't even feel like I know them really. You kind of realize some point in your life that these are people too, and they have their own feelings and lives and not just your parents, and you just don't get things from them. They need things from you too. So it's been like that realization leading me to investigate that more, and then using that as a jumping off point for talking about a broader context in the US.
So exciting. So
Yeah.
exciting. So I had one more project on my list here. Do you want to talk about the cinder blocks?
Yeah.
The correct name is cinder block MH walls.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
kind of probably
Why don't we
rename them differently every time.
No worries.
But it's really funny because this project is one of my favorite things to do. Because obviously I like doing things outside that are public oriented because there's less gatekeeping, there's more chances to, find a community of people that may never enter into a gallery. Because I always wonder, like, who's my audience? Like, yes, I would love my audience to be people that live in mobile home parks. I would love it to be, anyone that is interested, but like, people who live in mobile home parks, maybe, they're not necessarily going to New York City to see a show or into a gallery space. So like this allows me to access a different community. And this was great too, because it's in Franconia Sculpture Park, which is in outside of Minneapolis in a place called Schaefer. And so there's a very broad range of different classes and, people that live there. So this is, I've done like 4 or 5 iterations of these walls. And the first time I ever did it was in Philadelphia in like 2014 or something. And I just came across, there's a lot of gentrification going on in North Philly. And there's a lot of torn down buildings. So I would just go out and build up from the debris, the cinder blocks, and build up these like 4 or 5 foot walls and then slap an image of a mobile home onto it. Because they're like impermanent structures, like materials. And so that's where it first originated. And then I started to get funding to do these projects. I've done them on college campuses and different places. And I like to choose, like what I do first is I show up to the location. I look on Google Maps. I go to all the mobile home parks in the area. I usually try to choose the one closest to wherever I'm working as like a way to say this mobile home park is located, X amount of miles from this place. As a way of like bringing them into a spotlight and like saying like, when I talk to friends about my projects, they're like, oh my God, I saw a mobile home park today. I'll get these text messages because once someone starts talking about it, then you start seeing it and you start to realize like, oh yeah, this isn't a form of affordable housing. And I could do that too, or like, whatever. I lived in a mobile home at one point too. So this one was good because I was able to do 3 homes, make it kind of look like you're kind of going past homes in a community, how they're sort of stacked and the layouts of them. And then it's important to have some sort of language around them. Like this one that you're looking at now on the screen is a flag that I had printed with one of the homes. So it's like a garden flag.
So this one was printed on fabric?
Yeah, it was printed on like a fabric that goes on a little garden flag holder. This was at a university in Loyola,
these
Maryland.
are so amazing. I love them so much.
It's like I'm bringing it onto a college campus or some place where people are walking by, they're like, why is this home here? Like, what is this? Or even in the city, it's like no one knows what a mobile home is because that's a suburban thing. It's a rural form of affordable housing. So I really like doing this. I mean, it's hard work doing these projects
Yeah, I
because
was just going to ask about the labor involved in this because
the
so
labor is intense. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
if I'm doing it as a pop-up, I won't mortar them together, but that was the whole thing that I had to learn how to mortar cinder blocks, how to put them into the ground. I mean, the one at Franconia, I ended up having to hire a group of like younger union workers, but don't tell anyone because union workers aren't allowed to work like outside. But they were like so cute and they just graduated from their, tech programs, and they came out and helped me and taught me to mortar all these walls together. It
Wow,
was probably like
brilliant.
80 bags of concrete, tons of rebar, 4 feet down into the ground. This image here is the one from Philly. This
Okay,
is the
wow.
first ones I did where they weren't mortared together at all. It was just made with the sort of detritus of a construction zone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it is very taxing. And that's also, before I started making work about mobile homes, I made a lot of work about my body as labor. And I would build structures like using my body as material, like structures like scaffolding. And I talk about using the cinder blocks and like the labor of that. And like, it's just so like I just installed a piece this morning using 16 the larger cinder blocks. And it's like 45 pounds a piece, some of these
Yeah, that's
blocks. So I also kind of like that. I like doing work that's around like labor and how I feel like personally, like I'm always put into labor positions, whether that's me doing it to myself. Is that something that's like I feel like deserving of? Like, why am I never the manager? I'm always the laborer,
mm-hmm.
like that kind of thing. So I think a lot about that in my practice too. Um, and that also resurfaces back to this American dream of working hard, but like now you work really hard and there's no way to move up. It's actually like reversed itself, which is why I think Trump and all of this advertising is so effective now. Like I saw a billboard today that was, I forget what it said, but it wasn't Make America Great Again. It was just like, I forget what it said. I was going to look it up online, but it was just like a great sentence that was like, wow, I feel so reassured that you're going to help me. You're going to make me feel better. Like
Fucker.
these like Trump rallies, like I've, researched a lot of them and watched videos, and they're like Taylor Swift concerts. They're like
Wow.
literally the most exciting time of these people's lives. They get to go, they get to feel uplifted. It's like going to church or a concert and everyone there is thinking the same things you are and they all feel so good about it and they're like we're a part of something, a change, no matter what the changes, even though none of these changes he did in the past 4 years when he was in office helped anyone in low income brackets,
Yeah.
but it's like people want a change and that's the only person they have to look to. So
Brilliant. Well, Amy, you are amazing, and I'm so excited that I forget which artist referenced you to me, but
Lauren Weirdy did actually. I talked to her
Lauren.
yesterday.
Shout out to Lauren.
Yeah, Lauren, she's great.
Yes, I'm so glad that she connected us. Love what you're doing, and the way that you talk about your work is just so organic and natural. And yeah, it was an honor to speak with you. Thank you. All right, listeners, that's all for this week. Just before we sign out, I have a quick announcement that beginning in September, we are going to be running on a bi-weekly schedule in order to put more energy into our marketing of the episodes. So instead of every week, it'll be every 2 weeks starting in September. See y'all then. Bye-bye.